we're coming back to it over and over. It's how we know, and it goes back to that point. It's very easy to put a 360-degree customer view on the top of a mission statement, but a lot harder to pull it off. But it's understanding that point. Danny, I could see you were nodding and agreeing with Kevin there. I mean, there's a balance, isn't there? I think that's what Kevin, what underlines Kevin's point as well. There's just a balance between getting that data when it's fresh, but making sure that actually it has some meaning, and actually it's not skewed by the engineer stood in front of them. But it's, and what I thought was really interesting was Kevin's point that it's understanding how that customer is going to interact. Just expand on that point for me a little bit, Danny, because I can see you kind of had a thought there.
Well, I think it varies quite a lot by industry, right? When you have a site manager who wanders around a huge site and is responsible for, in production lines, that's very different to a B2C environment where you fix a washing machine, because there you know exactly who the customer is, where is, and so on. So the mechanism might change. I've had customers who actually wanted to have the communication by SMS because they knew the site manager would get that, whereas he wouldn't read an email, right? Yeah, because of the intermediacy. Having said that, I mean, SMS, I think is a very limited technology for customer satisfaction. It's just too cumbersome to use, and you therefore won't get many responses. So from where I'm coming from, I think putting all these pros and cons together, email is probably the one I would prefer now. The technology we have now, lets us do the proper service via email much easier. We've got the voice of the customer. That wasn't so easy even 5 years ago, and that's why you had these on-site collections, right? Now, I mean, what emails lets you do is it lets you size, it lets you ask 20 questions or 5 questions, which is appropriate. You won't ask 20 questions on a device that the engineer hands to you, right? You can change your questions if you think there's a specific issue with an email questionnaire. You don't have to reprogram the whole device, right? That tends, from the technology perspective, to be much easier to adjust that. With regards to delay, I actually think having it immediately has got some benefits, because you get a response. But on balance, there's an advantage of having it a bit later for 2 reasons. One is it's less emotional, right? It's less emotional. And the other reason is things might come to light within a day or several hours. The engineer might not have cleared up. You might find a leak that has sprung, right? That might actually change your response. So I think you get a more accurate and better picture a while later. And also, you get it to the right person, right? When you do it on a device, that's the guy who is there when the engineer finishes his job, and that might be after a shift change, and he might not be the best person to actually indicate the reputation that service call leaves behind. That might be the site manager who gets the email the next morning and can respond to it appropriately. So on balance, I think email with today's technology is probably much preferable approach. And again, voice of the customers plays very much to that sort of requirement, if you like.
And Danny, if I can just add to that as well, Chris. So absolutely agree with everything Danny's said there, and the sort of things we're doing with our customers to help to understand the various nuances and the things that we can help them with is we're trying to deconstruct their customer engagement. So it's understanding the touch points from booking a job through customer service contact centers, turning up, to deliver that particular service, and then the post-service engagement as well. And by deconstructing that whole customer journey, you can then start to identify areas of which you may want to. It might be a very quick survey because you want to understand, okay, well, how is this element of that journey work? How does that work? Is that working well? Do we need to tweak that a little bit? How does the engineer visit? How does that change? Do they have the right equipment when they turn up? Are they in the era of COVID? Do they have the protective equipment? Are customers okay to let them into the house? How can we ensure that our customers see that we have them at heart in terms of their safety as well. And then post the survey, how can we follow up and drive additional information from that customer to ensure that we've absolutely nailed that journey right the way through. So Danny's point is absolutely valid in terms of the multitude of ways in which we can adapt how the solution services could support our customers for their customers' needs.
It feels almost to me that perhaps the approach is to kind of build on your point there, Kevin, to deconstruct this is at that point of service. That's where we have an active engagement. That's where we have that face-to-face time. I've talked in various other streams around the importance of how that's even pre-COVID, how that had increased as we move into a world of digitalization, that actual human-to-human interaction. And I think that's even more important in this post-pandemic world. But it almost feels like, and Dan, I'll get your insight on this. It almost feels like there's an opportunity to have a very short response survey, 3-4 questions on that actual engineer's visit. Or did he turn up on time? Was he well presented? Was he courteous? Did he have the right PPE? Those kind of very, very straightforward. And then kind of maybe even have that final question is, will you be we like to do a more in-depth survey via email in a couple of days' time after the service, and have it as it's almost the two layers of it, and one feeds into the other. Is that something that you think could work, Dan? Just to get your points on that before we kind of look at some of the technologies.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, like has been mentioned, the term silver bullet's been mentioned a few times, and I think if ever there was a group of questions that were a perfect metaphor for human nature, then these were probably the questions that you would pick. One thing you can't anticipate is what a person is doing at the time at which you send the communication to them. So, that is one reason why I feel that some mechanisms are more effective than others, because with an email, you tend to be able to ignore the email until you're ready to pick it up. Whereas with SMS, it feels a bit more immediate. You could be out walking around the town or driving the car at the time when the SMS comes in. You're not going to respond then. And then by the time you remember about it, you think, oh, well, SMS is an instant communication thing. It's probably timed out now. And it's a mentality thing, I think. And so I genuinely think that human nature plays a major role. So the best things that you can do as an organization really are take into account the customer's preferences, as Kevin said. But I think we're going to go on to technology next, but I think artificial intelligence is going to play a major role in this space.
Yeah.